Several tens of thousands of water professionals attend WEFTech, Aquatech, Polytech or EFAT, yet this conference with 20 times fewer attendees is also 20 times more influential. Sure, it boasts some exhibitor slots for hand-selected sponsors, but that's no match with the multiple halls that traditional trade shows feature. Of course, they have plenaries, side sessions and the gala dinner, and of course those are very impressive. But still, that's not what makes this event so unique. So, what's the secret?
Good question. I thought so.
It's the casting, the people, the attendance. In a nutshell, all, and I mean literally all, the water sector's most influential executives, utility leaders, corporate water managers, and thought leaders meet at this summit once a year, be it in Madrid, London, Berlin, or this year, Paris. But why? Well, here as well, the answer is simple. It's in the event's website URL, Water Meets Money. Next to these attendees, or on the other side of a round table, asset managers, investors, and project budget holders gather to expose their tens of billions of assets under management to the latest opportunities, risks, and advancements linked to water scarcity, industrial water, climate change, AI, finance, and much, much more. Startups get to pitch, utilities to project their roadmap, corporates to open up on their challenges, and 8-figure deals even get closed in the thousands of meetings happening behind the scenes. Welcome to what's maybe the Davos of water. Welcome to the Global Water Summit. Here's what you'll learn today. First, how does water meet money? And equally important, how does money meet water? I've asked top entrepreneurs, investors, and consultants for their best wisdom. Second, what are 5 key analyst insights to take home from Paris? 3 GWA insiders will tell us, and number 5 made me particularly happy. Third, what do I take home from Paris? I'll share you my thoughts on the conference, but also some rapid-fire facts to shine at your next dinner in town. And finally, fourth, what did 7 hand-selected attendees learn at this year's Global Water Summit? I got some star power on the mic. So without further ado, let's get rolling. I leave the first question to Andrew Walker.
Antoine, you've done a lot of research in your free time on investment into water tech and come up with a lot of conclusions. What is the most profound one? Can you pick one out?
I'll take 2. And you mentioned the team, so I'm going to pick on the investors this time. And I'd say that the investor have to be patient and to be educated. Because I'm sitting, I guess, just next to the investor who did the biggest multiple in the history of water VC. He won't agree to that. He never agreed to that, but I stand my case. I do believe he's the one who made the best multiple ever. 84% of water investors cut a check and never come back. That might be because they have expectations which are out of this world when it comes to water tech. And it might be that we are not doing our job in explaining them what water tech exactly is.
Okay, so I feel confident enough to preach like that on a panel. Maybe I should also stick to my words and explore how water may better meet money. What would attract more money to water tech? What can water companies and projects expect from that money? What are the drivers? How can we leverage them? What needs to happen? What will happen? For that section, I've tapped into much more brilliant brains than mine. Don't worry, Helge Debel, Prakash Govindan, Devesh Sharma, Thierry Noël, and many more, starting with Earl Jones, who's a partner at DCVC.
You said what would be decisive for water investments is to see more exits.
Yeah.
So where would these exits come from?
Exits come classically in a couple of ways. Companies can IPO. That's a great way to get exits. You can see strategic acquisitions, again, usually from the big companies like, the Xylans and Veolias. And you can also see takeout from private equity, usually in the form of either some sector play or a roll-up. But those are the places where you start seeing exits come from.
How do you work the exit part? Is it something that you proactively have to do as an investor to look for the exits?
It's both. My view is always, if the exit window opportunity opens, you better don't ignore it.
As an investor, is it part of your role to be like the sales guy of the companies at exit level and to start looking for way out?
At DCVC, we are company builders. We don't invest in a lot of firms. When we invest, we do so with a very strong conviction around the technology and the team in the market, we roll our sleeves up and bring the totality of our network and experience to help our companies get to market faster and with more impact. We do see ourselves as company builders and everything that goes along with that. We are activists in helping our companies raise money through their investment cycle. We have very strong networks that we help drive business development. We work very closely with state and federal governments to try to understand where opportunities are and make sure that the things that we're investing in are highlighted in the right ways and people understand the importance. Things that we're investing in today aren't today's markets. We're investing in things that are going to be the next 5 and 10-year markets. So we're, as an early stage investor, we are trying to skate where we think the puck is heading in the future. And as part of that, we're always strong activists in making the sector and the companies well understood. And I'll give you an example of who's doing a great job right now at building a great water platform is Ember. Ember is a lovely, large private equity fund, smart folks, and they have a very strong water thesis, and you see them now starting to build a really nice water platform. Those are the places that you start seeing exits coming from.
From a realistic point of view, Ember is very concrete. They bought H2 Innovation, building upon that. We saw Pennybacker acquire Cambrian Innovation in a similar fashion.
Yep.
On the other hand, IPO doesn't have a strong track record in water. Something I looked into, which is a bit side of a statistic, is that there was a wave of companies that IPO'd in early stage water tech. And they made it, instead of going to seasoned investors like Helge, or to seasoned utilities who know what they know, like Mikorat, they went to the public markets with the claims that they're going to solve the world, that they're going to solve water resource and everything. And people were looking at it 1 year later and saying, but wait, scarcity still exists. So those people failed and then disinvested from it. And as a result, if you look at those water stocks, they lost 97% of their value. And I'm not speaking of a single company. I'm speaking of an array of companies that went public in early stages. Do you believe that's because the companies were not there yet, or because IPO is not the right path?
Oh, geez, I'm now blanking on the company's name.
I was blanking on the company's name too, but the one Earl was referring to here is Aqua Ventures, which went very successfully public under the ticker WAAS for Water as a Service in 2016, had a strong run, then got taken private again in 2020 in another $1 billion acquisition by Culligan. Now you have the context. Back to Earl.
That was a good public offering. I think folks believe that Gradient is getting pre-positioned for public offering.
You know what? If that's what folks believe, I should ask Gradient, right? Don't take it as a tricky question, please. But I had discussions with Pictet, with Roland Berger, and they told me roughly the same, which is, we don't have enough companies to invest in, which are public. And I was thinking, what company could soon get public, which would be the perfect target?
Thought you said no trick question. I mean, going public is one way of raising money. We want to go public for the right reasons if and when we go public. We definitely don't want to shy away from it because we are sloppy. So we have already implemented various processes which would get us there with things like SOX compliance and things like that. We are secondaries. We have paid back many of our early investors, 40x kind of returns. And the more recent investors have time. They have also put in much larger checks. So John Arnold's family fund, Centaurus Capital, put in $225 million less than 2 years ago. So they have time. So there's no pressure on us to give them a return right away. Some form of us will go public at some point, I think, but I don't know when exactly.
So you're setting up, but not yet.
Yeah.
Okay. Do you consider IPO an exit route in our sector?
Yes, but like what I just told you, when we get in, what we want to see, never plan on the IPO as the exit route.
Okay.
So if it happens, it's in line with what I said earlier, the exit window. So if all of a sudden the public markets are hungry for this, and you have a perfect story, let's pick one of our portfolio companies, Kilimno. So something that is very easily carried by the public understanding. And you really have a nice story that you can underpin what you need, the money for that you raise, why not? But, I mean, there is a high risk. We usually get locked up for 12 months, and so it's not an easy one. We have done IPOs at Emerald, but not that many. And if we can, I think we rather sell to strategics.
I see.
And we definitely don't plan for IPOs.
I don't think it's crazy that we see some more companies go public. And Exfiltration went public. They have a relatively nice valuation still. All right.
And Exfiltration is a good example.
Yeah.
They went public, but at a very early stage.
Yeah.
And the valuation could be worse, but it also could be much better. I just had a look at water stocks overall, and all these companies that go to market early with an IPO, their value is down 97%.
Certainly could be, right? So I think what it speaks to is that there's a lot of appetite in the public markets for the water message. It's not hard to get excited about the water industry. It's not hard to get excited about the solutions. But again, if you're trying to skip steps and you're trying to use a public market as a go exit where you don't have the underlying fundamentals or growth, that's never going to end well. But if you've got great companies that are doing important work with great business models and they have a good water story, I think the public markets are excited for that. I think they would like to see more, not less.
Peak I mentioned there's about 100 investable public assets globally in water, which when you think about the amounts of billions that are required, the challenges, it's ridiculously low. Most water IPOs have been oversubscribed. It's a really easy asset class to market to the greater public. And there's a lot of willingness to actually invest as retail investors or as banks, etc., or insurance companies in water, but it's just there aren't that many public companies. So it really limits the ability of all that money to come to water, where you have, thousands of public companies in energy or, in other sectors.
So in order to lift that limit for money to reach the water sector, we'll have to build the right vehicles. Hence my question to Prakash. In terms of company building, you've also created those two spin-offs, one which is a full spin-off, which is Turing, one which is a half spin-off, if I get it, which is Alkali.
Alkali, yeah.
So what is your idea? Is it to build a galaxy, like a gradient galaxy?
As the company gets bigger and bigger, we have 1,400 people now. And this year, we'll cross $1 billion in order bookings this year. By 2027, we'll cross $1 billion in revenue, which is getting quite big. There is increased focus on EBITDA as a percentage of revenue, and we want that to be more than 20%, which is highly feasible with Gradient. And some of the earlier stage stuff then lends itself to a different treatment. So there is a thought in Gradient to carve that out and focus to build Gradient separately. And the carved out entity will continue to, in your words, create a galaxy of stars. There is a saying though in Sanskrit, one moon is better than many stars. So Gradient will always be the moon. If you think of in terms of how we sell things, selling a early stage PFAS technology doesn't lend itself to the same kind of selling or the same galaxy of customers as the semiconductor stuff we are selling or the mining or the food and beverage, differentiated as it might be. And also separate funding is nice for different investors. We don't think of as people who write a check. They're partners. It has always worked very well for Gradient to think of investors as partners. They have brought us credibility, brought us customers, brought us people. We have hired people from our investor base. There is a lot of reason to treat the new things separately.
Let me pause here for a moment, because I believe what Prakash just said is an important key to understand investor dynamics in this tricky dance that water meeting money or money meeting water can be. In different times, conglomerates were a great way for astute investors to park their money and to have it actively working in different fields, sectors and verticals, hence mitigating the risk of a sector going down. But times have changed, and nowadays investors would rather create their mix themselves and have only specialized stocks, companies and verticals to pick from and build with. As you just heard, Gradient caters to this, maybe to the extreme, by carving out every single division that has a different profitability or maturity profile or centers on a different vertical, which is no different from what we discussed with Andrew and Helge in the Mekorot session.
Would you go for super disruptive or super boring?
It depends. If it's my money, I'm going to go with super boring.
Great point. Great point.
That's why you have different types of investors and money in the sector. People who thought one step too far in this sector exist, and you cannot be like Uber or OpenAI and just go out and throw money at it and it's going to stick. I mean, people are going to come back at you and ask for results much sooner than they would for other tech, which is not fair. It's absolutely not fair, but it is what it is.
I follow up on the Uber comment. I think one other difference that we have obviously in the water sector, our addressable markets are much, much smaller, right? While it's still crazy to throw a lot of money at an Uber, you can throw a lot of money at something very disruptive, because if it succeeds, the market behind this is gigantic, right? In water, it's just not the case. The overall market, we hear these big figures. It's a big one, but not a lot is really tech related. And I would actually argue most of the technologies have an addressable market of not much more than $1 billion. To your point, it's sometimes not even different from investor to investor. I would argue how I build my portfolio. I should have some nuggets in that are disruptive, and we hopefully know the early adopters to help the company to find their path and then sell it as a tech asset, not so much as a commercial success, and also have some that are boring and build some commercial momentum earlier.
Okay, here I believe I need to preface the transition, because using Aquatech as an example that more than one path is possible just after Helge mentioned boring companies may be upsetting. But here's the context. As a brilliant session moderator, Andrew Walker triggered us with the following provocative sentence.
Energy tech is way cooler than water tech, but AI tech is still best. Discuss.
I think that energy tech might seem cooler, but water tech is literally what keeps the world cool. First of all.
Yeah, that's an applause.
Yeah, but AI is taking all the credit.
I would debate on if we want to be cool. We're in a room full of water people. If we say water tech is cool, we're gonna get applauses and everybody's super happy. I think it's very cool to not be the cool kid. Cool come and goes. Water is here to stay. You need water in a lot of applications. 39% of the world's GDP by 2035 will be produced in water scarce areas. So you don't need to be cool. They just need water.
How do you make it less uncool? How do you get it out to people?
Just one element, one
Podcast. Need a podcast.
Oh, that's an idea. Let's do that. No, actually, just one element of why uncool is cool. When you look at water tech as compared to the overall clean tech, it's a fraction of the investment. We do know that, and we can cry about it for a while. But then, when you look at clean tech compared with AI, when AI became hype, clean tech went down. Whereas investment in water tech stayed pretty steady, if not growing. So that means that clean tech is way cooler than water tech. But when an even cooler kid comes in town with AI, well, clean tech goes down. So I'm pretty happy to be among the uncool people.
I like how you do correlations.
You're saying it's not causation. Okay. So, in summary, and to be clear, I've used the word boring quite a lot. I'm a wastewater engineer, and I'm working for a piping company. So trust me, I know one thing or two about being boring and working in the boring industry. And I say that with the bottom of my heart. I love that we are boring. Now, that preface down, let's go back on track and let me do once again a comparison between Gradient and Aquatech's approaches to company building. As we've just seen, Gradient spins out every section of the company that would potentially appeal to a different investor profile. That's what made them the water sector's only unicorn, and also what makes them quite a different company than Aquatech, even though they arguably play in the same vertical. Actually, Aquatech does the exact opposite, and it serves them equally well, as they've seen an equally impressive growth in their industrial and mining markets, while the minority investment they received from Cerberus Capital Management 1 month ago didn't disclose amounts or valuation, but would probably not put them too far from being the real second unicorn in the water sector. Isn't it tricky for a company like Aquatech to have all these different technologies and to be spread in all those directions? And you have to juggle and keep so many balls in the air.
I thank you for bringing this up because I saw that interview, but it's a very good question. You know, in any business, you're taught that specialization is very important. So I completely understand where the question has come from. It's that how can you have this depth and breadth of technology and how can you keep it vibrant? And wouldn't it be better just to focus on a few things? I have a contrarian answer or that thought. Aquatech focuses only on one thing. We focus on providing a process guarantee to an industrial client. And to do that, to be able to do that, you need the technologies that we provide. Our whole strategy and technology is: what do our various industry clients need? Can we acquire it? Can we develop it ourselves? Can we partner with someone for it? All with an end goal of being able to provide them highest reliability, lowest cost. We don't go and just say, hey, we like this technology. It's got to fit our strategy, and we're singularly focused. And so my argument is, we don't do many things, we do one thing.
My point here is not to oppose them, but to highlight that there's more than one path to glory, and it seems, as I said, that it serves Aquatech well, as they pocketed the coveted title of Water Tech Company of the Year. Congrats!
Thank you so much.
You've been campaigning. I've had Rora with me to
campaign for you, so it's somewhat my victory as well. No, it's yours. It's fully yours.
It was absolutely your victory.
What's your feeling after Water Tech Company of the Year?
This one is really special for us because starting with the name Aquatech, from the founding of the company, this is what we're about. We're about water technology. We've worked very hard to establish our technologies around the world, our approach to this industry, and we feel very proud of that validation.
Do you need the validation?
No, but it's nice.
It's nice. Okay. I'll try to catch Davos soon in Milwaukee for a deeper dive, so subscribe if you don't want to miss on that. And let me bring you back on track with a clever macro view of why money and water are more prone than ever to meeting. Thierry Noël, take it away. You noticed a strong increased interest in the type of intelligence service you're delivering, which is a way to show that the water risk and the industrial reaction to water risk is taking momentum.
Yeah, definitely. I think the last 3-4 years, you've had droughts, repeated floods. You've had industrials, investors thinking, okay, what's our real risk? Where are we going? What's happening? You've had the fact that we've gone from climate change to climate adaptation. We missed the 1.5 degrees. And I guess the one sentence that sums up what's happened the last couple of years was carbon, CO2 is the problem. Water is the messenger. I think industrials, investors now realize that you have to understand the water risk. You have to put in place plans. You have to mitigate it. You have to ensure it. You're going to have to do something about it. So they're at the stage where they're still discovering what their exposure is. The water industry, as we know it, now includes a lot of sectors who didn't pay attention before and who see now water as a strategic risk rather than just an ESG report data point, but actually as a fundamental, strategic, operational business risk, which can really totally disrupt their business and their value.
Once they discover that, how does that translate in concrete steps in investment?
I mean, the first thing is they want to find out. And today you don't have very clear metrics or systems like you have in energy or in carbon or, the ESG reporting, etc. Water is actually very weak, very poor in metrics, except to an SDG 6 reference, there's not much. So part of it is understanding it, putting it in a system that's measurable, and then basically looking at how you can mitigate that risk, what you can do about it. And part of the challenge then becomes as well, which is very specific to water, is that the risk is not just you. The risk includes what's around you. So it has to be collaborative, because when you're on a water basin, water is a shared good for all the players of your local situation, which means it's a risk you cannot address on your own. An industrial can mitigate its own risk, but if everyone around the industrial doesn't have water, then it's his risk as well. So there's the added dimension of it's not a single asset, single owner, single property topic. It's a common good, which makes the risk assessment, the risk mitigation even more complex. It means it has to be a collaborative effort. It's going to be a challenging period, but large industrials, data centers, they've now understand that water is a strategic issue. It's about license to operate. It's about value of my shares. And it's about, can I actually operate? Google had a $500 million write-off in Chile on the data center that ran out of water. Floods. There have been plants they were very resilient, except there was no infrastructure that was working around them.
So that should make water topics and water assets very investable.
Yeah.
Yet your analysis is also that they might be too small for infrastructure funds to jump into it.
Water is local, and it's, if you compare it to big infra, airports, energy, etc., water is a lot of small assets, except for the very large desal plants in Saudi Arabia. So the number of big assets are quite limited, which means that I think there's a role for project developers, for people who will, if we talk about the Almars, the 7Cs, the IV3, etc., one of their roles is probably to develop assets, aggregate them, and then make them bankable to some of these larger pension funds or larger investors. Just a bit like, you had the first developers in solar and wind 10, 15 years ago. Now it's mainstream with big money, etc. So I expect we'll see something similar in the water sector.
You mentioned how DCVC has $4 billion of asset under management. Mm-hmm. How much of that roughly is water?
Very small. Again, so the firm's been around about 16 years. But I would say in our last fund, water is a much larger percentage of the last fund than it has been in prior funds. And it's part of the reason I'm at DCVC now is to help the firm think through through its water strategy. So I think we're very committed to the water space. We see water, again, as an essential element for national security, for economic prosperity and defense. I think it is largely consistent with all the things that we do. And I think we're very excited and committed to the water industry.
Every time I speak with water investors, they speak of a point of inflection, like something is happening right now. And if you're in water, I'm a water guy, you want to believe, but is all of that the proof that it's happening, or do we need to see something else to say, yeah, it's really happening now?
The signals are getting stronger. You look at large investments by firms like KKR, it's there, it's happening. You see also water becoming, I think that's key, becoming a positive political topic in places where you have droughts and floods. It is becoming a public policy, public issue in many countries. And I think from water being the topic you don't want to talk about during elections to now a key topic during election, I think that's clearly an inflection point. If you look at some of the transactions that are happening, even if there's a lot of players and there's a lot of new names, we'll see if they stick around. But I would say that's up to us as an industry to put in place the projects, the companies, the businesses to basically keep them in this industry so they bring their capital.
One last question on the structure of the industry. The largest water company has maybe a 2% market share, which just shows how scattered the sector is.
It's very fragmented.
Is the fragmentation a good sign of resilience, or at some point does it need to consolidate?
It will consolidate. I think when you look at a smaller scale, when you look, there's been a lot of private equity investments with mid-size water companies, and all these companies have done, numerous acquisitions. You look at most of the large companies in water, they are already a consolidation story themselves. That's going to keep going. We'll have a few giants, but I don't think we'll ever get to a situation where you have 3 or 4 players globally, because you will still have a very local issue. You still have utilities, you will still have regulations, so you'll still have some level of fragmentation. But I think on the supply chain, you're seeing companies like Veolia, like Xylem that are going to keep growing, keep building up. The territorial aspects will stay quite fragmented. Supply chain will densify and consolidate for sure.
And with that horizon look, it's time for me to close this first big chapter for today. To open the next one, a sneak peek of some of the best intelligence GWI shared in Paris. I'll have 3 brilliant analysts joining me on the microphone in a second, but before that, I'd like to thank my sponsor, Simple Lab. If you're in the water industry, Simple Lab has you covered. Simple Lab is your one-stop shop for certified laboratory testing kits, from routine lead sampling to walk-ins and specialized analyses like microplastics, PFAS, and rats. Order the testing you want online, choose from hundreds of accredited commercial labs, get free round-trip shipping both ways, and by the way, if you have your own lab and just want help with kitting and logistics, Simple Lab can do that for you too. No more coordinating labs, chasing shipments, or wrangling EDDs, just streamlined ordering, clear results, and real support when you need it. It's lab testing simplified. Head to gosimplelab.com, it's the first link in the description. Choose your test and they'll take care of the rest. Thanks again, Simple Lab, and back to me. I was super interested by something you said in the session just seconds ago. For the first time in 11 years, or as long as you're reporting, Europe is a growth engine.
It's partly a result of the fundamentals in Europe, but also in comparison to North America and East Asia. So North America, we're seeing passing a peak. In China, we're seeing a slowdown, which is bringing down East Asia. It leaves Europe in this fantastic position where it can really lead the water market going forward. You can look at that in the UK, where you're seeing 70% rise on the last AMP period. Going into this AMP period, you've got £104 billion worth of spending in the next 5 years. But particularly in the EU, if you look at the investment required underneath the Urban Wastewater Treatment Directive, you see it coming on the industrial side under the Industrial Emissions Directive. Italy is at record growth rates as a result of the Recovery and Resilience funds. And water scarcity is really actually moving the needle now. You're seeing more investment than ever in drinking water networks, particularly leakage reduction in France, in Italy. You're seeing desalination coming to Italy, coming back to Spain and Cyprus. There's a lot of opportunity to be excited about.
So it's not only a reaction to the rest of the world, it's also structural to Europe, and it's not like one country specific.
It's true growth across the European Union. It's growth that we expect to accelerate when the impacts of the water resilience strategy are felt, and particularly if we get a dedicated envelope for water spending in the next European budget.
Okay, that one though, I wouldn't take it really for granted because, and I'll come back to it in my rapid fire segment, the plenaries also opened the mic to more generalist executives, let's say, like the EU Commissioner for the Environment, Water and the Circular Economy, Jessica Roswell, that gave, let's say, a pretty vague speech. If you're not familiar with the way the EU works, she's like the government minister for a 450 million people federal country, and her water agenda revolves around three main axes. First, restore the water cycle, something that honestly my 10-year-old daughter can come up with. Then create a water economy, something that I guess everybody will agree on, but hardly builds itself just because you call it on stage. And finally, increase water resilience, because yeah, water resilience is better than water scarcity. I may sound embittered right now, and I acknowledge that, sorry. But the reason I am is because what the EU Commissioner is proposing to make it happen is to hold a water resilience forum every 2 years, which, honestly, do I need to tell you how much I believe in white collars with ties coming together to agree that water is life every 2 years? So, on Sebastian's findings on the evolution of the water market in Europe, I take the growth and reinforced growth at face value, but wouldn't bet too much on spectacular political action beyond that. My 2 cents, back on track with the US, which is, again, a different conundrum.
What struck me is that there are 2 specific areas with PFAS and lead lines where the existing regulations are set in stone, but the timelines might be shifting.
As I understand it, the lead regulation is still sort of held up in court with challenges from the AWWA. And then on PFAS, we thought initially perhaps that the Trump administration would roll back on that, but we think that the core will stay, but the timelines will shift.
The Trump administration, Trump's first term, the EPA first proposed to regulate PFAS in drinking water. A lot of people associate Trump with this kind of huge deregulatory push on the drinking water side. Obviously, the Biden administration, their PFAS roadmap was extremely ambitious. And I think, a lot of the noise around PFAS at the minute, there are a lot of people worried. Obviously, a lot of investors have poured money into the sector. Utilities are, beginning their upgrades, their activated carbon and their ion exchange. And a lot of people are worried about what happens with these standards. But I think from GWI's perspective, we think that the standards themselves will stick. The EPA's new head, Lee Zeldin, has a pretty strong track record on PFAS as it goes. What will happen is that there'll be a softer approach towards compliance. So utilities will have more time potentially to comply with the law rather than specific changes on standard. We might be having an administration now that is willing to work with utilities around those timelines, potentially giving them some more generous scope for these upgrades. We are moving into an era of general deregulation, but I don't think PFAS is going away. I think that would be the message from us.
The beauty of the current US administration, though, is that it can drive analysts crazy. For instance, the GWI folks had prepared a session on the consequences of the US tariffs when the same day the Trump administration was pausing the Chinese trade war for 90 days. Well, history repeats, and right after I recorded that bit with Luke, the EPA released an update on their PFAS policies that states the following: they are overruling and reconsidering their limits on 4 of their 6 regulated PFAS, with PFOA and PFOS rules staying where they are, but with extended timeline for compliance from 2029 to 2031, and the other 4, PFHXS, PFNA, GenX, and PFBS, seeing their limits reconsidered. Now, specifically, the EPA administrator stated that this doesn't necessarily mean standards will be weakened. They could be reconsidered and re-put at the same value, but the process will start this fall with a new rule expected by spring. There are also positive signs in the announcement, with the launch of a program called PFAS Out to help utilities meet federal drinking water standards. Somewhat a band-aid to replace the revolving funds, I would think, though. Funnily enough, the EPA still estimates that over 158 million Americans are exposed to PFAS through drinking water, but under an administration whose Secretary of Health and Human Services happily swims in E. coli and colloids with his grandkids. That probably doesn't matter, but I digress. Let's go back to probably better market news from down under.
I think in the session this morning, Jan characterized what Australia did 10 years ago as water insurance, which then we saw everybody else in the world adopting. I deem sometimes Australia to be like the future. To that extent, I was intrigued to see that
Australia has the talks around increasing water tariffs to cover capex, which is needed on the infrastructure.
If you look at the water tariffs, both in Australia and in Northern Western Europe, they were flatlining, some of them were going down. You kind of felt that we'd reached this peak affordability. And what we're seeing now is, if you look at Sydney Water, they've got a 10 billion Australian dollar spending plan over the next 5 years, upwards of 13 billion in the long term. And they are saying that we need to increase tariffs to pay for that. And they're quite a lonely voice within the Australian sector at the moment. But it seems like Sydney is the canary in the coal mine, as it were. And there's a lot of resistance to tariff rises elsewhere. But if Sydney can push it through and deliver results and avoid some of the damage that could be caused by aging infrastructure, then we'll see it elsewhere as well.
You had that crazy growth rate of 21.6% growth in capex in Germany. What's happening with semiconductors in Germany?
That is project-based. The European Semiconductor Manufacturing Company, which is a joint venture between TSMC, Infineon, and a couple of other companies, but they're just building this huge new advanced manufacturing fab in Germany, which has kind of really driven up the growth rate for the time that it's being manufactured. Time will tell past 2030 to see if Germany can kind of keep up with that growth rate, but for the time being, yeah, it's pretty high there.
You're saying time will tell? What's your informed bet?
There are some other projects in Germany that have been delayed. Intel's Magdeburg fab was delayed, so I think we can see some investment kind of already on the horizon that's just been delayed from now. So I think it's promising. The EU have realized that they need to do a little bit more for semiconductors.
The other fact which caught my eye, I'm a wastewater guy, so I was cheering for wastewater. You show that both in growth and in market size, wastewater is gaining over ultra-pure water in semiconductors. What's your rationale for it?
First of all, it's not to say that UPW is growing slowly. It's just that wastewater is growing faster. I think that a lot of semiconductor facilities are realizing that they need to make more of their wastewater and try and reuse as much as possible, which is really driving spending on wastewater. Now there's just so many more segregated streams than there was in the past. 20 years ago, there were 2 streams for wastewater. It was HF, precipitation, and neutralizing the acid. And now it's 20 different waste streams that need to be treated and then kind of go together for end of pipe. So there's just a lot more on offer, I think.
And with those two be linked in some art or fashion, like you would be reusing some wastewater and then feeding it as makeup water for the ultra-pure water?
Potentially, way in the future. It's definitely possible, but I think that the risks are going to make semiconductor manufacturers very averse to trying that without, extensive piloting, a lot of very advanced metrology to kind of test that there's nothing going into the makeup water that's going to cause a disaster.
And this closes the Analyst segment. Big thanks to Sebastian, Luke, and Georgia for sharing their findings. If that gave you the taste for more, you'll find their datasets on gwawaterdata.com. I'm not endorsed, but my friend Björn is. So if you'd like to subscribe, use his secret code BJörn10 and you'll get 10% off. And if you're looking for more semiconductor insights, Ultra Facility will be back in Austin this December. Now, if semiconductor companies don't recycle their wastewater yet, it's probably because they haven't heard of my sponsor, Bluefoot membranes. Have you ever heard of a membrane that refuses to break? It sounds uncommon, but it's true. Meet Bluefoot Membranes, a Belgian company that has developed the first and only unbreakable membrane specifically designed for MBR. If you're new here, membrane bioreactor applications. This technology is setting a new standard in wastewater treatment. Water engineers and industry experts have tested this membrane, and no matter how much they pull and twist, the membrane holds strong. Now, it's not just about membranes, it's also about an award-winning and passionate team that doesn't take impossible as an answer. The people at Bluefoot Membranes are driven by a mission to make wastewater reuse the new standard, united by a shared purpose to leave a blue footprint on the world. So yes, they manufacture cool membranes, but they also push the boundaries of what's possible in MBR technology. To learn more about them, check the link to their website in the description. A big thanks to Bluefoot Membranes for sponsoring this episode, and back to me. Now, all along these 3 days at this year's Global Water Summit, I've gathered some notes, which I'd like to share you in a rapid-fire fashion right now. First, if the event was great overall with a record attendance and a great deal of networking opportunities, I've been slightly disappointed by some of the sessions. I believe that some speakers in the plenaries didn't really read the room. They gave the same speeches they would give to a muggle audience when it was the creme de la creme of the water sector that they had in front of them. I had already seen some of the presentations at other non-water specialist events, and I believe that even Christopher Gasson couldn't refrain from making a couple of witty comments after listening to some of his speaker guests. I'm not saying it's easy, and I don't know if I would do better, but this is not a stage to say that water is life. It's one to make an impression on your peers, key financiers and suppliers, and there were only a few that managed to do this. That's for the plenaries, but the side sessions also suffered a bit. A bit less, but still a bit from too much generic information. I attended a couple of finance panels, hoping to not understand 1 out of 2 words, as they would be jargonish and deep, which would have triggered me to research and understand what was said, instead of which it was so accessible that I didn't learn much. Now, to DWI's credit, the reason why this is so frustrating is that reading the agenda, you always had to make tough choices between different topics that sounded really interesting. So sitting in a panel that's under-delivered also meant I was not attending another one in parallel that I would have craved. Last negative, and then I promise you it's only positives, a panel is only as good as its moderator and speaker combo. I know that a panel is almost never spontaneous and that a lot is prepared. The questions and the answers, it's a pity, really. Sure, it gives you some hilarious moments like when Pierre Poliac from Suez broke the fourth wall on the main stage by revealing Christopher's script, and as both him and Christopher are bright minds, it gave a funny and insightful segment, but the magic doesn't really work in every session. Maybe different formats could help here. Here's to my top 3 of panel moderators, though. Number 3, and down 3 ranks from last year, Roger Harabin, still in the top simply because he's brilliant. Down 2 ranks because he got the opening session instead of his usual second-day opener, and his speakers were really not fun. Number 2, and a repeat number 2, Piers Clark never fails to deliver. The Isle sessions are overbooked every year, and it has to do with the format, the content, but also the moderator. Kudos to him. Maybe a business idea for Isle and GWI, you should sell the session slides, because as hilarious as the smartphone dance is, my wife is pissed at home when instead of portrait of our children, she sees blurry PowerPoint pictures popping up on our digital photo frame. And number 1, I might not be objective because I was his panelist, but Andrew Walker stole the show by flipping the side session on its head with format innovations, but also provocative statements. I had a lot of fun being in there, and I would believe the audience equally so. There is great questions from the hot seats, like this one.
Dear panel, we're all excited about innovation. We love it. That's kind of why we're here. My challenging question to you is, if innovation stopped today and no new technologies were developed, this is a 2-part question. Number 1, do we actually have all the innovations that we need? If we stopped developing them new today and just implemented them properly at scale, would that help us hit all our energy efficiency and net zero goals by 2030, 2050? Number 2 is, if you think no, what's the key innovation that's missing?
Before that's the other answers, can I just clarify your question? Are you speaking innovation in terms of technical innovation or innovation overall?
Technical innovation.
Okay.
I think, technical innovation is what everybody gets very excited about. Business innovation, business model innovation is actually what's often transformative.
Mm-hmm.
That was going to be my answer, so you put the answer in the question somewhat. You can stop technology development and be very innovative on the business models and solve most of the problems for 2030. What the problem we have is a problem of commercialization, of adoption, of deploying the existing technology. Sure, you can always do better, but I think what you're implying with the question is, if we already use what we have, we would be better off. And I agree with that. And
I completely agree. I think that I like the scenario where we just freeze the innovation pipeline. I don't think this would hurt us because we have the technology, we have the innovation, right? So it's about the shift of mindset. So how you can shift policy, procurement, and the investment mindset. So I think this would provoke the world to react to what we have and do the business model and financial models that takes to accelerate the pace.
But if you stop innovation, you in a way stop any kind of creativity. And why would you, right? It doesn't mean that you cannot come up with better things. And sometimes it actually goes hand in hand. It's just a small technical improvement that unlocks a different kind of business model as well.
Can I just challenge that one with an Apollo 13 reference? Like Apollo 13 was lost in space and couldn't do anything. And if they were not finding a solution, they would crash and all die. And they could not innovate with anything else than what they had within Apollo 13. Mm-hmm. And they found a solution, which was to take a piece of the manual and then use that cardboard piece to connect a part of the Russian part with a part of the US part. And so you can be innovative and creative under constraint.
Yeah, but that means they were still innovative.
Yeah, but it's not. Yeah, okay. It's a matter
The
of definition.
system was closed. The system was closed. Okay.
So we need life or death scenarios to become innovative.
Okay, I said rapid fire, so let's rapid fire from now on. Heard or seen in sessions this week, a proof that they are still interesting, right? There is $7 billion worth of lithium and $10 billion worth of magnesium thrown away every year in the Permian Basin. That's the figure that was shared in the session. I fact-checked it, and it's even more than that. The message is resource recovery rocks. Magnesium again, there's more magnesium thrown away in the Carlsbad desalination plant than is consumed in the US in a year. In obviously unrelated news, Aquafortis won the Distinction Award at this year's Tech Idol. I also was told that the next big water IPO will be Culligan and that they will be larger than Veolia. I let the predictor defend his prediction if he wants. They might get public again after US Filter took them private 30 years ago. Maybe not larger than Veolia, but not far though. AI is progressing at 5 times the pace of cloud adoption, said Autodesk in a panel this Tuesday. There has been a clear hype around AI, the event being themed under accelerating investments, AI, which is not a coincidence, I guess.
You got a big brain up there.
But for sure, there's an appeal. By the way, AI in water may well have a Chinese accent. Several examples were shared, and adoption seems well ahead in the Middle Kingdom. I was especially impressed by how Greentech Environmental designed its plans to be AI operated, hence not needing much space for operators. I don't know how ready the sector is for this, but the idea is brilliant. I had more anecdotes on microplastics, river water quality, and onshoring jobs, but after fact-checking them, I'm not quite sure they're right, so I'll pass. I also took quite some notes on future topics to cover, companies to interview, and I still need to wrap my head around some fascinating financial modeling shared by RBC Capital Markets in their roundtable. So, did I have a blast despite my harsh comments? Absolutely yes! Now you've heard my key learnings from this year's Global Water Summit. Let's move to my last segment and let me ask selected attendees what they are taking home, starting with my friend Walid Khoury.
Single learning, it's a little bit a stretch because there are so many things that you can keep seeing here. The Global Water Summit has always been about money. The website even is like water meets money, so the unlocking investment is more of a title, but it has always been the case. And I think what's changing today is that we see a lot of technology and convergence of technologies. So before we used to talk about treatment, now we're talking about AI, you're talking about data, how you access the data, biotechnology with all the nanomaterials coming in. So we have things we never had in the past in terms of technology, and you see them all around the place. But what I like also is that now we're coming to a realization that it's good to talk about it and talk about the water scarcity and so on. But I've seen some of the presentation shifting more about the solution, how we can make desalination more attractive for African countries, for example, how we can deploy solutions much faster and solve problems, which was a little bit kind of a shift. I hope this will invite more investments in the industry because, as we usually discuss, it's still challenging to get the money in. These type of discussions, it will be help to educate the lawyers and the investment firms that there is money to be made in the industry. It might not be the sexiest, but it's long-term resilient, so there is no risk in terms of losing money at the long term.
I really enjoyed the Lord Stern at the beginning, showcasing basically from 20 years ago his predictions were bang on and the world didn't listen, and we haven't invested into resilience and water infrastructure. And now there is like a cry for help and urgent action, urgent investment into infrastructure. And if we don't take action, I mean, we're going to see catastrophic level of change. We're already seeing these, 1 in 100 year storms becoming much more frequently than 1 in 100 years. And I think that opening kind of like call to arms and call to action for the industry is really inspiring. So that was my almost like hearing Lord Stern say, I told you so to the climate community, and like, guys, get on with it. We can't wait. I found that like really inspiring. So
there was a panel on the future of desal. Paul Scholes was the moderator, and he asked the question to 6 people. There were consultants, there were EPCs, there were OEMs, there were Europeans, there were Americans, there were Africans. Everyone was there. And he asked the question, in the next 5 years, how do you see desal plants or desal technology changing? And almost across the board, except the head of IDE had a different answer. The other 5, nothing much will change. And that was so depressing for me. So I have this increased determination to make a difference in desal because I haven't focused on desal, as you know. For me, desal is not seawater desal. I do desal for industrial reuse, mainly zero liquid discharge, minimum liquid discharge. But I've always had many ideas on how to disrupt the desal space. So I carry with me this determination to change that answer within 5 years. Yeah. Might not work, but I'll try.
It's probably around reuse. Reuse
is a big topic, it always has been, but now there's this momentum towards maybe coming up with a overall target of this 50% reuse, like Christopher Gassan has talked about, and then also that drafts with the reuse report that GWI came out with last week. And I think one of the most interesting things from that's also been discussed some here is this idea of the marginal cost of water. And so when water scarcity, is continuing to happen, is only going to get worse with climate change, that new sources of water are needed. And so those marginal costs of water now is going to be, higher and higher. We can see that in, rates. The GWI reported a few months ago that between July 23 and July 24, the average rate or tariff charged by utilities, combined stormwater, wastewater, and freshwater drinking water, went up 10.4%. And so this kind of a concept of marginal rate of water, cost of water is what's going to be added in. It relates a lot to reuse. I think the California standards, somebody mentioned, I think maybe it was Christopher, that 18 log reduction requirement is just like way too excessive. And so, yes, we need reuse. We need new source of water. Yes, the marginal dollars for that are higher to help pay for it, but they can't be out of control. We have to do a good job with that. That's what I got.
I've been coming to this place for over 15 years. It started out very municipal and infrastructure, and it maintains that. But every year, corporate water is getting more and more active in this space. We started out with a one dimension of, water's always been. I mean, we've been in the industry for 40 years and there was an industry for 40 years before us. Water is a mainstay of industry. Then we got to sustainability. So industries are interested in sustainability and how water fits in their sustainability. I think we're now moving to a third dimension that it's going beyond sustainability. It's going to water risk and water resilience. And those are a lot of the conversations we're seeing, that it's very important. The issue of climate change and flooding or droughts and the risk of having water to continue manufacturing is on everybody's mind. It's something that's bullseye for Aquatech and what we try to help solve. And very excited about that. So that's what my one takeaway is that corporate water risk is moving higher and higher onto the agenda of some of the biggest companies in the world.
Wow, a lot. But my preferred thing is that many corporations could translate in our language how important is being water positive or bringing positive impact in water resources outside the firms, what they call it water stewardship. That is the most important thing. We are living the connection between the SDG 12, what they are bringing to us, responsible consumption and production and consumption, with the SDG 6, the tariff, no investment, waiting for something that we don't know what will happen. For that reason, we are living the connection between the both SDGs. And something unique is that we will connect all the 17 SDGs. For me, it's a unique opportunity, and we were here living that.
I was surprised that still there's a discrepancy between what we talk on stage and what the real actions are. Whenever I go on stage or whenever I listen from the stage, I hear about innovation, about acceleration, about money. Innovation comes with startups. But if you are in the operational field, if you look outside, right there, and if you were looking from the startup perspective, the first thing what you always have is, if you want to work with a corporate, is okay, what about the NDA? Where's the court place? Which country? And things like that. And then the startup is saying, okay, maybe they're just getting my knowledge and things like that. So there is still, and we talked about this years ago, Antoine, and it was the same. It hasn't really changed. So my biggest learning really that this discrepancy still exists, and I'm a little bit disappointed about that, and we have to work this out.
And with that, that's the end for today. You were nearly 1,200 to attend the Global Water Summit, so there's a good chance you've got different learnings that you're taking home. If that is the case, come tell me in the comments. I read and reply to all of them, and that helps me spread the word. Finally, if you want a good reason to subscribe, here's what Prakash told me right before leaving the mic.
I'll give you a hint. There might be a milestone coming up for Gradient in a few months this year. I would want to go on a media tour and talk about it. You'll be my first stop. I love your podcast. I listen to it. All the people you talk to, I listen to it.
So if you don't want to miss this one, make sure to subscribe. And if you do, I'll see you next time. And let me close with what's maybe the best marketing. So here, honestly, it's from Aqualia. It's salts which are recovered from desalination. So I think the way to put it is tasty resource recovery.